Hey everyone, welcome back to another tech video, and the M1 iPad Pro is now a year old as of this month, and that kind of doesn't seem right, but it is. And the main reason for me that it doesn't seem right is because it still just feels like an iPad. And for a lot of companies, that's a good thing. Saying that the new product feels like the old product but better is a huge compliment, but for the iPad, it's kind of an insult. And I'm going to talk about why and what I think Apple can do to improve it. The iPad Pro with the M1 chip is the most apparent example that we've seen so far of a problem that has plagued the iPad pretty much since it came out, which is that the hardware has always been a little bit ahead of the software, but the gap for this has never been more massive. I mean, like, just for me personally, when I would sit here using the iPad, I would be using an iPad with all the same limitations that we've always had with iPadOS, even all the way up to the most recent version, but the chip powering that experience was the same chip that was powering my M1 Mac Mini, which allowed me to run full-blown macOS with programs like Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, a full version of the web browser Safari, as well as a very capable and competent file browser. And we just don't have that on the iPad. And with WWDC right around the corner, and iPadOS 16 also right around the corner, I want to give you my wish list, the top 5 things I would love to see added to iPadOS. So let's get started. The first thing I'm really hoping to see, but I'm also not really holding my breath for, is the ability to sideload apps. And if you've been using any sort of Android device, you're more than familiar with that. Or even if you've been using macOS or Windows, you have sideloaded a program at least once in your use case, I guarantee it. Now, for anybody unfamiliar with sideloading apps, it's basically just the ability to take an app from the web and download it onto your device and run it as if you had pulled it from the App Store. And for anybody who is exclusively familiar with iOS or iPadOS, that's something we've never been able to do because, for security reasons, we can only get things through the App Store. And while I can see how the App Store being the only place to get apps is more secure, I feel like the other reason is just because Apple is making a profit off the developer fees. So I don't see this being a feature actually added, but it would be something nice to see. The next thing on the list for me is technically 2 things. It's the calculator and the weather app. And we already have fantastic examples of those on the iPhone. In fact, the weather app is literally just dark sky modded over to look more like an iOS app. And we even have a widget for the weather on the iPad, but it just takes you to the Weather Channel website. And yes, you can do math in the Spotlight search on this iPad, but just put a dedicated app for both of them. I mean, what really pisses me off too is that Dark Sky, which is the app that Apple acquired, had a tablet version. You have the foundations for a tablet-based weather app, and you just haven't done anything with it. That's more frustrating than anything. And actually, one of the things I'm hoping for that we'll talk about in a minute is something that would greatly benefit from having a miniaturized version, sort of an iPhone-sized version of the weather and calculator app, but we'll get to that in a bit. Either way, just having those apps on here would be so nice. I don't know why they haven't been on here, and it's been years, so maybe we'll see it this year, hopefully, but time will tell. Something that is on the iPad, but I would like to see a massive improvement to, is the Folders application, or just generally a file browser that is better than what we have. Because while there have been massive improvements to the file browser with things like column view, the ability to plug in USBs, which took way too long, and even things like marks and folders where you can actually color up what you're looking for to find it easier, it's still not perfect. And really at this point, I don't even know why Finder hasn't just been ported over, because it clearly runs fine on ARM architecture with the M1 chip, and well, that's exactly what this is, so it just sort of feels like a missed opportunity. And even with things that you take for granted in a regular file browser, you still can't do on this, like formatting a thumb drive, which if I were just using an iPad on the go and I needed to completely wipe a drive, I would still need another device. So adding things like that would be phenomenal. Apple, please, and thank you. Now, the next thing on my list is something I was kind of hesitant about just because I wasn't sure how it was going to be pulled off, because I've used the Microsoft Surface before and they definitely didn't pull it off there. But I would love to see Apple's rendition of a dedicated mouse and keyboard interface, something that is more mouse and keyboard friendly, and then have sort of a transition over to the touch interface. Let me explain. Microsoft actually tried to pull this off with the Microsoft Surface and Windows 10, because when you would detach a keyboard from a Surface, Windows would automatically scale everything up to be more touch-friendly, and you would just have a better overall touch interface, at least for navigation. And then when you would connect the keyboard, it would switch back to a more keyboard and mouse-oriented setup. The problem is that if you open an app in touch mode that wasn't touch optimized, all the click points were still super tiny because they were expecting a cursor, not a finger. So if the app wasn't optimized, it was almost unusable because you really need to have a mouse and keyboard when the touch points are that small on a display. That's kind of the main reason why I was hesitant to say that I wanted this feature on an iPad Pro, because Microsoft sort of went and made a keyboard and mouse interface into a touch-friendly interface, and it didn't really work. But Apple sort of went backwards and made a touch interface more compatible with a keyboard and mouse. And that definitely seems to work better, and hopefully they'll take that same approach and just give us floating windows since the screen is big enough, and hopefully make it a detach and reattach sort of feature where you have a full touch interface just like iPadOS, but for those of you who were dumb enough to spend $350 on a keyboard and mouse setup, you can connect your iPad and have a different experience with floating windows, something that is more akin to what this exact same chip can already do on a full-blown desktop. That's the hope. And the last thing on my list is just something I've wanted for so long, and again, is something that can be handled totally fine on a full-blown desktop running the exact same chip, and that is Final Cut for the iPad. Apple, please just give us Final Cut on the iPad. It's been so long. You even moved iMovie over to the iPhone in no time. This was when the iPhone 4 was a thing, but yet you have not even tried to put Final Cut on the iPad. It is ridiculous. LumaFusion has skyrocketed in popularity because people clearly want to use this as a secondary machine or a primary machine for their video work, and it is capable of doing it. Why wouldn't it be? I literally ran my entire channel off of an M1 based Mac Mini for a year, and yet for some reason you don't deem the iPad powerful enough. That makes no sense to me. Just give it to us. I don't care if you even require it to be something that the keyboard and mouse needs to be present for. If you're feeling really nice, you could make it touch optimized, but even just give us the full-blown version of Final Cut and require the mouse and keyboard or some sort of input device, I'll be happy. I just want to be able to take this with me on the go and edit and not have to change my editing style for LumaFusion. I got no problem with LumaFusion, but I have a specific editing style that Final Cut accommodates and just doesn't get in my way for, and I have to change it every time I use LumaFusion. I'm getting so worked up, I'm getting tongue-tied, damn it. I saved this one for last because this is one that I have wanted for so long, and especially with Apple implementing the M1 chip into the iPad, there is no excuse. Even with something like the iPad, what is it, the Air now has the M1 chip in it, you have two full high-powered iPads that can fully run Final Cut that just don't because of the limitations of your operating system. And yes, I know this might not be an iPadOS feature, but it's something that would just take the iPad, especially the Pro one, to the next level, because suddenly you can use a Pro app on a Pro device, or at least a device with Pro in the name. But either way, that's been it. We'll see if any of these things actually come to fruition at WWDC. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Over 90% of you aren't subscribed to this channel, so that's kind of sad. But if you want to subscribe, make the channel bigger, that would be awesome. Aside from that, leave a comment letting me know what you all think, and I will see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.